Welcome to Beyond the Balance, where we redefine wealth and rebuild futures. Because financial freedom isn't just about numbers, it's about making your money work for you, your future, and your freedom. We're here to talk about wealth, growth, and the stories that prove you don't need a perfect balance to make a perfect comeback. Today's guest is someone who bridges the world of faith and finance in a powerful way. He is a pastor, podcaster, author, and the co-founder of a large financial firm that's been helping people take control of their finances since 2011. With years of experience guiding others through financial decisions and life's bigger purpose, he's here to share his journey, the lessons he's learned, and how faith and finances are more connected than we might think. Welcome to the show, Pastor Jay Gauthier Sr. I'm happy to have you here.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Of course, thank you. And before we dive in and talk about anything too serious, I'd love to learn more about your journey.
Also, my journey, really, all the way from the beginning, I guess you could say. I grew up in a fairly good family. I was blessed with that, but but no church background or anything like that as far as faith is concerned, until I was about 16 years old and was actually invited by a family to go to a Christmas program at a church, and just kind of kept going. It was actually someone that I ended up eventually marrying, so that was pretty awesome. And life really kind of changed for me, and I guess you could say that God just kind of turned it completely around. I was going to be a professional musician. That's actually what I thought I was going to do.
Really?
Yeah, but then God kind of like took a different direction, took music away for a little while, and then kind of gave it back later in another capacity. But and then I've been in ministry now for about 38 years, and I've actually been in the same place in El Monte, California, First Baptist Church of El Monte, for the last 33 years. And
Wow.
so that's part of my journey. But in addition to that, some turns kind of came around 15 years ago as well, where he also took me into the area of finance and helping people financially just build plans and build their own bank and do all kinds of concepts, which was kind of born out of failure, I guess you could say, because it was a situation where we pretty much had messed up everything when it came to finance and money, and pretty much had lost everything. So I think the amazing thing about it, the way God works sometimes with a huge sense of humor, is he takes those who, I guess you could say, you're the most qualified to help the person that you used to be. And you're in a situation where you can have some empathy and really put yourself in someone else's shoes if you've actually been there. And so we have a very large financial firm as well, in addition to ministry now, that we've had with now people all over the place, over a couple of hundred people that actually work with us.
Wow, that's amazing. May I ask, was it you personally that experienced that financial trauma, or was it like your church or your organization that you've co-founded? How does that work for you?
Actually, it was kind of everything. It was what happened. It was like a snowball effect at the time. Finances were very tough at that particular point. The church was struggling, and the church was not really able to provide the compensation that they had been doing for me, which caused us to have less and less, and prices were going up. And I was actually working about 3 jobs trying to hang on to our home and everything that we had, and that was a battle that I ended up losing. So that was a very difficult time, kind of a time where it really shakes your understanding of everything you try to put together that now you lose. And
Right.
a lot of things were falling apart. Ministry was falling apart. Just a lot of things were happening, and caused me to really question, wow, how did I mess up everything so badly? But I kind of, in that moment, I had a sense from God as I was asking God, I don't understand. All I was trying to do was the right thing. So how did all this mess up? And the sense I kind of got from God at that point was, you need to remember what I'm telling you. It's going to come a time it's going to look like everything that I kind of gave you a vision in life. It's going to look like it's never going to happen. And just when it looks like it's never going to happen, that's when it's going to happen.
Hmm.
And so I held on to that for about 7 years, honestly, struggling through, pressing forward until things really started to turn around.
Wow. How did that challenge your faith? Or I mean, with your pastoral background, were you able to keep that faith or did you waver? How did that challenge you as a person?
Well, there was definitely wavering. There was definitely, for me, I got really probably the most depressed and down that I had been in my life. And the problem with it, especially with the pastoral situation, was that I couldn't really show that. So there were very
Right.
few that I could really, admit that to. I remember being in the car with my son, actually, and my son had just been learning to drive, and so he was driving the car, and we were going down the street, and all of a sudden he says to me, he goes, "Dad," he goes, "what's wrong with you?" And I
Mm.
was like, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "I don't know." He goes, "You just seem like depressed or something." And of course I was like, "Oh no, no, I'm fine. Just a lot of stuff on my mind, a lot of things I'm trying to deal with." But he was right. He knew. But I couldn't really say much. I had to keep functioning. I had to keep trying to be there. But inside the internal conflict, what basically was happening was this. I didn't really blame God in my particular case because of the grounding that I had. I was pretty much more just blaming myself. Um, but as I was trying to make sense of things, one of the things that just the thought that just kept coming to me because I knew that God had allowed this situation was, okay, I don't understand this, but the one thing that I do know is, God, you can't possibly be wrong. That is not possible.
Okay.
So I don't get what's going on here. I don't understand what's going on here. Please, help me understand why, because I don't get it. And I found at that point in my life that I had to really get brutally honest. I think a lot of times with God, people make the mistake of, I'm going to be so formal, I'm going to say the right things, I'm going to make sure I don't say the wrong things. Um, I just had to be honest, saying, I know you're not wrong, but I don't get it. And I don't understand what I did, and I don't understand why all this is happening. Please make sense of it to me.
Do you feel like God was ever able to really give you that closure as a
Yeah,
person?
absolutely. So what ended up happening is then when I end up going into the financial industry, excuse me, which was really unexpected. When I did it, it was actually where he brought back, the way it happened was a young lady who had been in my youth group, hadn't seen her in 15 years. She shows up to an Easter service, and she asked me, she said, "Hey, I know that you also have tried some businesses, and I just started with this, and I think it's something you'd really want to look at." And I had looked at some things, but everything ended up being a failure. And where people would make promises and break them, companies would change, people wouldn't come through with what they said, and basically I burned a lot of bridges. And so my thought at that point when she came to me was, you know what, I'm done trying things. So I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in looking at that at all. And she was persistent though. She came back to me a couple weeks later, messaged me, asking me, and I said no, I want to do that. Finally, I checked it out just to help her out after the third time of her kind of coming back to me. And what I learned was, as I went into it, I said, well, I don't really know anything about this, but it's obvious I don't know anything about money because I don't have any and I've messed up everything. So worst comes to worst, I'm going to learn something and it'll just be another tool in the toolbox. So I guess at that point, I was just willing to let God do what he was going to do with no expectation of what really was to follow. I think sometimes in life we just have to, God lays the next step in front of us, and people's temptations often is to say, I have to know, I have to see how this ends up before taking that step forward. Sometimes he just wants you to take that step forward and do it in faith, saying, I don't need to know the result of this. I just know this is what he's telling me to do now. And so that's what I did. Um, and through the course of time, I now understand exactly why everything happened, because we've now been in the position to have communication, to build relationships with thousands of people that just staying within the church walls as a pastor only, I never would have met, never would have had that influence. There was a point in my life where I really sensed God saying, hey, I want you to have an impact on so many people's lives. Well, that would not have happened without these difficulties, because I would have just stayed in that little box and that would have been it.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. I think we absolutely need to kind of fall down a few times to grow as people, so that makes complete sense. So, may I ask then, what lessons have you learned about money through your personal journey that you wish more people knew about?
Those are great questions. So most people, what they do when they get money is it literally like burns a hole in their clothes. They just have to, they're,
Get rid of it.
they're spending something immediately. And most of the time they're spending it on things that have absolutely no value. Money is really a tool. And so I think what's very important that I wish I would have known so much earlier is to take a portion of that money, first of all, recognize the source of where it comes from. So it comes as a blessing from God, and God entrusts it to us. So I'm going to give back because I'm going to do that in faith, knowing that He's the provider, and He wants to see, just like in the parable of the talents, how faithful are you and how trustworthy are you with what I provide for you. If we prove that, then he gives more to the one who is faithful with that. The one who's just going to blow it, that they're not going to get any more. So a lot of the reason that people are not having money is because they don't handle it right. So why would God give them more? So that's one lesson I would want to learn earlier than I did. And then the other thing is, if we can stay with the parable of the talents there for a second, what do you do with the money then that you are given? Find ways to take a portion of that and earn a return on that. So good investments, things that have value, things that actually lead to producing more, not just spending it away. The average person, they get their paycheck or they get their, whenever they get their wages, and then, I mean, they go blow it the next few days, and then they're waiting, longing for the next time that they get it. And that used to be me. So those lessons are extremely important, to get a handle on it and find ways where money will actually reproduce itself and create additional funds.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I've heard this term in one of my readings, and it says that the way to really be financially responsible is really to make your money work for you. And so, how do you suggest that an average person really lets their money earn, like, work for them?
Good question. So that's a point that's very poignant and very important. I mean, a lot of people are willing to work for money. But what if that money also was willing to work for you? That would be incredible, right? So if we think of money as, for instance, something that we send out to capture more money and draw it to itself and then come back doubled, tripled, quadrupled, that would be wonderful. Like if you take a dollar, for example, and or whatever monetary thing that somebody's using, and you multiply that, say 20 times. So in the case of a dollar, If you would multiply a dollar 20 times, one becomes two, becomes four, becomes eight, and we do that, we're at over $1.1 million if we do that. Okay? The only problem is most people have no idea how to double money. And also, if they do, they don't know how to do it without risk. And they don't know how to do it in a way where, like, taxes and fees and everything that goes together with it doesn't suck it up. Because if taxes and fees and everything are attached every time you double that money, instead of over $1 million, you'd have about $28,000. So it's a totally different amount of money, a huge amount of difference. So how can you double it and at the same time not have all the taxes and fees? And so there are type of investments and index funds and safe ways with guarantees where people can take a portion of what they would be saving in a bank, which is going to pay them virtually no interest, and they can put it into these accounts where they can still get access in a not too long a period of time, leverage that money, and at the same time it's growing. They can get access to the money while also and amazingly, you could have access to the money and still gain interest on the total money as if you never touched it. That's the amazing part about it. And most people don't
Interesting.
know how to do that. Okay? There's a concept which some people have probably heard of that are listening to your podcast right now called infinite banking, building your own bank. That's definitely something that is a lot easier to do than people realize if you have somebody that actually helps you set it up in the right place and sets it up the right way. And I would say that if I were telling myself many years ago, what is it that you should be doing, I would have started that a lot sooner.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And so, to go back to the faith aspect of that, how do you incorporate faith then in your financial decision making?
Well, great question. Great question. And really, that's the number one filter on anything, whether it's with money, whether it's with time, whether it's with any resource that God gives you. I think the questions that we need to be asking are, first of all, can this in any way advance the kingdom of God? Or
Okay.
is it something that just has nothing to do with that whatsoever? Okay, so that's one filter that I put everything through. Okay, like for instance, I coach young people at the high school level, um, girls basketball. I've coached for over 20 years. A lot of people would say, well, that's something separate. That's not your ministry. No, that's also ministry. I do it because I'm having an influence on young lives and I'm showing young lives what it means to be a person of faith, even if I'm not necessarily preaching to them. Okay, so that flows through the filter and it works. If it was just something that I was just doing for me, just for my own flesh or whatever it was, then maybe that's not the best use of my time. So,
Right.
same thing with money, what I'm going to be doing. I mean, why would I want to make more money? Why would I want to have more money? For some people, it's because, oh, I just want to buy all kinds of stuff. I want material things. In my particular case, I don't really, I mean, I like to have some things, but I that's not really my main reason. That is not enough motivation because all of those things are temporary. But if someone has a need and I'm able to meet it, if there's a ministry that I want to be able to fund and I'm able to fund it, in that particular case, God, bring me as much, help me to have as much money as possible so there's not those limitations. If I want to be able to be financially independent so that I can spend my time serving Him, and here he is, I'm sorry,
That's okay.
rather than having to work a particular job that doesn't necessarily lead to those things because I have to spend my time there. That's what financial independence will do for you. It gives you those options to be able to serve God more fully.
Okay. I can totally understand how you think about it that way, and I guess I would tend to agree in my own personal life. If you're just serving your own selfish purposes, then you definitely probably will not make it that far, especially when handling money. So I completely understand that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, then. Well, then, as you progress and you learn how to build your wealth and your finances and also learn how to help other people succeed financially, what challenges have you faced as a Christian entrepreneur in the financial industry?
Another great question. You're asking some good ones this morning. Um,
Thank you.
Basically, there is that area. The financial industry has had a lot of accusations go against it. You know, people that will put you in. They'll say, "Oh, don't do some of those exact things that I'm suggesting today," because they'll say, "Oh, it's too expensive." If you're tying it to life insurance, which by the way has its huge advantages because of tax reasons and flexibility and everything, they'll say, no, that's too expensive. Don't go that route. It's a ripoff. And to a degree, they're right, depending on who sets it up for you. There's a lot of people out there that just try to serve their own interests rather than that of their clients and the people that they're helping. They'll pad things up. They'll make things more expensive than they need to be. I've seen a lot of greed. You know, whenever there's money, whenever there's things like that, there's greed, there's dishonesty that flares up in people. People that'll do, even people that claim to be people of faith, that then will compromise in those areas for their own benefit.
Yeah.
That's been something that myself and my son, who's run the business with me, and a lot of our advisors, that we stress very, very strongly. Look, we're not going to do that. We're going to put mission over commission, and we're going to do the best thing for people. It possibly you're going to lose out on some of your commission that you could possibly make, but what's most important is to find the balance and do the right thing for the person that we're helping, because they're entrusting us to do that. So that I think right there is the biggest challenge of something that I've put before myself. There's been promotions and accolades and recognition that I have not received, that I could have received if I would have just charged the client more, and they would never even have known the difference. But God knows the difference. And
Absolutely.
I think the lesson there that's been hugely important is as Scripture says, we're to seek first God's kingdom and His righteousness. And then the rest of it, when you do that, the rest of it He promises to add. So we need to just do the right thing. It's always the right time to do the right thing, and realize that when we do that, then God brings more business, God brings more blessings, God then supplies the increase. It's not something that we should be taking into our own hands.
Absolutely. Okay, that makes perfect sense. As I said, this really helps to give that balance between faith and people's money, because I think we have the tendency to separate the two, which I personally don't think that. If you're a Christian and you have your faith, that you should be separating your finances from the way that you believe in God.
You're right there, and I think that in every capacity. So whether I'm coaching basketball, whether I'm being a pastor at that moment, whether I'm helping someone financially. I mean, early on, when God took me into the finance industry, I had this misconception. And the misconception was, okay, well, over here I'm going to be Pastor Jay, and over here in the financial thing, I'm just going to be Jay. And, it's going to be a different type of situation. Well, I found out very soon that God said to me, He said, no, you're the same person. I want you to be the same person everywhere you are. Okay? It's all ministry wherever you are. It's not ministry over here, business over here, sports coaching over here. It's all ministry. So every person that I bring, every appointment that I give you, every interaction is a divine appointment. And I want you to approach it the same way. Don't be going in and sitting down with someone going, oh, this is when I make a sale. This is when I make money. No, it has nothing to do with that. No, this is when you meet a person of value that God has created, whether they do a sale with you or not. it's still going to have value because you still had an interaction and built a relationship with them. So when I started looking at it that way, everything started to change, and it's amazing the part about closing things and helping people and income and all that. That literally just took care of itself by just focusing on the right thing.
And a lot of people do not realize that. If you let the right thing be the first thing, then how can you fail? Really.
It's exactly. I mean, put it this way. Looking back at that passage, seek first the kingdom of God, and all the other things will be added unto you. Who is more capable of adding those other things to you, ourselves or God? So why am I going to sit there and try to take the hard route of trying to add these things when it's so difficult? And in reality, if I'm doing it wrong, God literally is going to put up walls and actually resist me on it. And I'm not going to win that. So it's easier just to do what he says to do and focus on that, knowing that he already promises to take care of the rest in his perfect timing and gives you what you need as he knows you're able to handle it.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for that. And I do have a few more questions for you.
Sure.
I really want to know, many people have struggled with the idea of making a lot of money while staying true to their faith. What is your perspective on that?
I used to agree with that. I used to feel that way. Um, and I used to think that I was limited on what I was actually getting because of the fact that God didn't, it would ruin me, right? And I think there was a period of time where God didn't allow. Like I said, I kind of struggled building a business in finance for about 7 years before it really started to take off. I mean, it was working, but not to anywhere near to the degree that it does now. And part of the reason was there's a growth factor that has to take place. God knows, for example, um, that at certain points in our life, we're probably not prepared for a certain level of income. It'll get us off. We'll spend it the wrong way. It'll take us in the wrong direction. So I believe that part of any type of growth, including financial, there's a real personal spiritual growth that God wants to do in us. Um, because he wants to see, as like I said, we're faithful with certain things, and then he adds more, but he knows how much to add at the right time. Um, I used to, want more money because I wanted to buy those certain things and have those certain things, and that was my main focus. Um, but I think that money is just a magnifier. It magnifies who you are as a person. So if you're flawed morally or spiritually as a person, it's going to magnify that more. If you're more on a solid footing, it's going to magnify that more. So now at this point, I felt weird saying this, but now I literally will pray to God saying, God, I want you to give me as much money as you feel I need to have. Because I want to fund this ministry and I want to do this. And I want to, for example, I wrote a book recently, and I'm doing like challenges and putting it out there, and I'm basically giving it away to most people. And I want to reach other countries with it and do different things, but that does require some funding.
Of
So,
course.
so Lord, this is the desire you've put in my heart. So I'm going to trust you for the funding, and give me as much money as needed. I don't feel guilty about it anymore because of why the way that I want to use it.
I love that. And, sometimes I get this memory of watching Joyce Myers, and she would always say, asking God for what you want or need is never too much. And sometimes I have to think about it because we oftentimes feel a lot of guilt
Sure.
about what we really need in life. And as human beings, we need money, right? And
Right.
sometimes we feel just asking for the Lord to help us get our bills in order feels like a lot. And so I can appreciate the fact that you consider money to be a magnifier rather than, a source of evil or something like a term that people often use in terms of money.
Right. They say that the love that money is the root of all evil, and the Bible does not say that. It says the love of money is the root of
Right.
all. So there's a huge distinction. When money is just a tool. I will say that when a certain point happened in my financial career, and then I got to a point where really the business became more than just me producing it myself, but a large team of people that were doing it. And there was a point there where I struggled with what you're saying because I started really, making a very good income, it in addition to just me, but also people that I had trained and people that I had worked with. And at first, because they were still struggling much more than I was, at first I felt kind of guilty. It's like, you know, wow, it's just flowing in at this point, and I felt guilty about it. And then I was really kind of wrestling with that, and then God kind of impressed upon my heart. It's like, I don't understand why you're feeling guilty about what I've provided for you.
Right.
I provided this. You've gone through the struggle. You've been praying about this and things you want to do. This is my answer to your prayer. So why are you feeling guilty for my provision? And so at that point, I had to kind of shift and say, okay, then instead of feeling guilty about your provision, what I need to do is be the best steward of your provision as I can.
And I think that honestly, there's no other way that you can say something like that. To be a steward of the things that God provides to us is the biggest blessing I think that we could have in our life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Basically, we're just the channels. Like God entrusted to you, and then to be able to have the joy of doing with it, helping people, doing the reason that He gave it to you. It, it it's kind of like if we take it from a human standpoint, and you go to someone with something that's very precious that you want done, and you hand it to them and say, I'm trusting you to do with this what I'm hoping you will do with it. I'm trusting you to pass this on. I'm trusting you to use this faithfully. I'm trusting you to use this in the most responsible way, in the way that I'm intending as I'm giving it to you. And when they actually do it, that's very pleasing to us that they actually fulfilled our wishes. Well, that's the way that we need to look at it when God entrusts us to be stewards with the resources that He gives us. It's a joy then to go turn and be that conduit that actually then delivers what His intention was, knowing that He'll be pleased with that, because we want to please the one who loves us and who has entrusted it to us. So that's one of the greatest joys we can have.
Well, I think that certainly gave me some enlightenment. I don't think I've ever thought about it that far. And so it really makes me feel pretty good to have heard that. And I really hope that that touched a few other people as well.
Amen.
And so you really talked a lot about how you talk to your younger self and what advice you would give young Jay. And so I was going to ask you what advice you would give to your younger self, but since you've already told us, what advice would you give to young people or an average person who may be living paycheck to paycheck or is overcoming debt, or maybe somebody who's like facing the challenge of maybe homelessness, any person that is essentially struggling or maybe facing the struggles of life in the future?
Well, the big challenge, and this is a huge challenge, okay, because it defies all human logic, okay, and that is you're already struggling, you already don't have the money, okay, and I totally get that, but you're going to give to God first, okay. A lot of people will say, well, I can't do that because I don't even have enough for what I have, okay. But so it's good. But here's one thing we have to start with on that. Okay, you
Hmm.
already have that situation. You're already broke. You already don't have anything. So the way that you've been doing it has not been working. Okay, to continue to do it that way and think that suddenly it's going to magically change, there's no reason to logically think that it's going to magically change. So the first big step of faith is this: you need a business partner. Okay, and that business partner is God. Okay, God
Yeah.
sets up a really good deal. All right, and that is, in my particular case, I mean, we can make biblical cases for this or not, but I'm figuring, okay, I'm going to look at the tithe, I'm going to look at whatever. So in my particular case, the conviction God gave me was, it doesn't matter what amount I give you, whether it's $1, whether it's $10, whether it's $100. Here's the deal: 90% of that is yours to use. The first 10% goes to me.
Hmm.
Okay. Now that might be like, oh, I don't even have enough. Okay. But that's really not a bad deal. You're talking about God who's saying, I'm going to help you. I'm going to do everything for you. We're going to change this whole thing around. And all I'm asking for is that first 10%, the rest. So put it this way: if you're having trouble living on $100, okay, being, you're gonna have trouble on 100. You're gonna have trouble on 90. It's not gonna be that big of a difference. Okay, but meanwhile now I'm working along with God. Okay, and then God says, I'm going to lead. I'm going to produce. I'm going to start doing things in your life. I'm going to lead you in the right direction. Um, that's number one. Is take that step of faith and that acknowledgement. God doesn't need the money. That's not the point. The point is that we're trusting Him, and He's now calling the shots, and we're bringing
Right.
Him into our life. Okay, so that would be the first thing that I did not do for quite a long time. And I found that not only did I lose the 10% with ridiculous emergencies and everything else that came up, I lost much more than that. So that would be number one. Okay, do that. Trust Him. It's the one area in Scripture where God says to test Him. It's the only area that I know of. In Malachi, it says, "Test me in this. Bring everything into the storehouse, and see if I do not fill the barns to the brim." All right, so that's number one. And by the way, motive is important. A lot of people go, "Oh, I'm going to give God because He's going to give me way more back," and it's all about just give me, give me. No, do it whether or not you see that or not. Okay,
Right.
because just because we're trusting God with our life, okay, it's an acknowledgement. It's a form of worship. It's a form of. So get that straight. Things will start to change at that point. And then the other thing is, be smart about what you're doing then with the money. It's stewardship. Okay, are you just going and blowing it on things that have like no return? People blow it on like lotto tickets and vices and different things that they're doing. Oh, I'm saying that. Oh, I'm going to do this because I think. I mean, I will tell people that if they're trying to win a lottery or they're trying to win some big pot, I have about the same chance of winning it as they do, and I don't even play it. All right, the odds are really horrible. Um, but if God really wanted me to win that, the ticket would just come flying in, out of the window or whatever. But that's that. Do things that then make sense. Do
Hmm.
things that invest in yourself. Do things that will bring some type of return. Obviously, you're going to have to use money for your necessities and your bills and things like this. But don't just go blow it on things that, then you're sorry because the next day you have no money. Get your priorities straight. And that's another thing that I did very poorly early on. Um, Save something, put something aside, put it in a place where it's going to actually grow, earn some interest, or
Hmm.
invest in yourself in something that's going to create a skill to be able to earn more income. Do something to that effect. Um, those are some crucial, important shifts that if a person will make, I'm not saying it's going to be instantaneous, but they'll start to see the fruits of it.
Beautiful. Well, then I think that was the perfect note to end on.
Awesome.
And I just want to give people the opportunity to learn more about you and where they can find you and possibly talk with you and really learn more about your experience?
Well, there's a few sources. They can look me up on Facebook or Instagram at my name, Jay Gauthier Sr., and connect. I'd be happy to connect. I also have a book that I just put out called The Audacious Faith Playbook, which can be found on Amazon. And it has a lot of the great teachings in there that God has really impressed upon me over 38 years of ministry that have been compiled into this book. And so they can do that. They can also reach out to me by email at jgauthier@gmail.com, and I promise I will respond to you. So I'd love to have people reach out.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you know that you've given me some lessons personally as well that I will take with me. I can see that your faith really, really, if they spent time with you, will touch people's heart. And so I hope we can do it again. Hopefully down the line, as I also grow as a person and my faith grows as well, I hope we can kind of turn around and see how things have changed.
Absolutely. Anytime. Just let me know and we'll be happy to do it.
Thank you so much.
Okay. God bless you.
You as well. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of Beyond the Balance. If this conversation inspired you, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Keep redefining wealth, rebuilding your future, and taking control of your financial journey. And always remember, you don't need a perfect balance to make a perfect comeback.